Today on Adversity to Strength, I'm joined by Jared Maxwell, military and law enforcement veteran and author of the gritty action thriller, The Last Gunfighter. Jared spent nearly a decade in the military with 35 months deployed in combat, followed by over 10 years in law enforcement. He's lived through some of the toughest environments imaginable and now channels those experiences into writing powerful, character-driven stories of survival and resilience. Through his debut novel and his work as a storyteller, Gerard is shining light on the psychological realities of life and showing how adversity can fuel creativity, meaning, and strength. Gerard, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
Yeah, appreciate you having me.
No problem at all. Absolute pleasure. Take us back to the beginning. Where did your journey start for you?
So when I turned, I was turning 18 in high school, right around the time when we had the September 11th incidents happen in New York City.
Yeah.
So I pretty much, I was my senior year in high school, so that was, the thing to do at the time was like you're getting ready to graduate high school. Pretty much that class was the military class because the country is not going to war, so that meant that all the young people are going to be joining pretty much fresh out of high school. So that was like the big surge right there was the class of 2002. So I enlisted in the Army. And I was a paratrooper for most of the time that I was in. When I enlisted though, so Afghanistan was kind of where the focus was at the time. But we in the middle of training was when the situation in Iraq started to deteriorate. So because of that, the talk was basically like, plan on going to Iraq because it seemed like that's where the war was going to turn to. Went through, basic training, all that stuff. I went to my unit, then I was training nonstop. And then we ended up finally, Iraq kicked off when we went. In 2003 was my first deployment. And I got sent to Iraq and mostly spending time in the city of Fallujah, which later became a very well-known city for like the major battles there and everything. So that deployment finished and I decided, I decided I liked what I was doing. So I re-enlisted and I was going in for special operations, which I ended up not completing the training. So I went over to a different unit, different part of the Army, and we deployed again. We went to Afghanistan. So there was a situation that escalated in Afghanistan at the time. And this is kind of what really did me in as far as the Army. The reason that I didn't want to do it anymore was following this deployment. So Afghanistan at the time had, for the most part, kind of quieted down. At least it seemed that way. And the focus was now in Iraq. So pretty much all of the resources and everything was going to Iraq. So there wasn't much support out in Afghanistan at the time because they didn't expect much. That was until they sent a Navy SEAL team on a reconnaissance mission in the northeast of Afghanistan. And this is a very beautiful area too. It's in the mountains. It looks like the Rocky Mountains, very, very rocky and very tall mountains with very tall trees, like a lot of forests, green vegetation is just very pretty there. But, no one expects that that's where you're gonna have to fight. And that's not a good place to fight. So the SEALs got sent there and 4 of them did a reconnaissance mission. And basically what happened was they lost a bunch of people. It would turn into a whole debacle. Only one of the reconnaissance team survived. And then they had in the process of the rescue, they had a rescue attempt get shot down in the attempt to try and save them. I think they lost, about 19 Americans were killed that day in only a few hours.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I think I could be wrong, but I think it was about 19. So basically that put a very huge emphasis, like what the hell is going on in East Afghanistan? So what they found out basically is, okay, like we don't have a presence there because they didn't think much of it, but that was the infiltration route for the Taliban. They were moving all of their weapons in and out of Pakistan over the border right there in that eastern area through those mountains. And that rugged terrain made it so easy for them to do it. So the idea was like the unit that I went to was going to be sent in there with the Marines and we were going to take over that area and establish outposts so that we could cut off the supply lines to the Taliban. And that basically was the most dangerous thing you could do at the time because the Taliban, we didn't know, were basically regrouping because they had been basically wiped out and pushed into Pakistan at the time. And the idea was that eastern area is where they were pretty much regrouping. So it was a hornet's nest they dropped us into.
Yeah.
So that deployment was over a year and it was hell on earth. It was the worst 15 months of my life. We had a lot of our people died, a lot of casualties. Basically, we went out there and established outposts and then we were moving all the time. We were probably, I carried upwards of like sometimes almost my body weight. Like I weighed about 160, 170 at the time. And my pack was like sometimes 130 pounds. and carrying all the supplies that we need for days, and we're moving up and down these crazy mountains. We're going climbing very steep hillsides and running on almost no sleep. And then basically what they called it was a move into contact. So the entire thing that we did was like our purpose there was to make contact. So they had us walk, and we're moving through the mountains, and we're walking until someone shoots at us, and then we get into an engagement with them. Engagement's over, and then we go about walking some more. That was pretty much how it went. So yeah, so my, my company alone, I spent some time in the Korangal Valley, which later also became famous. They call it the Valley of Death.
Heard of the Valley of Death and the Helmand province are the ones that stand out for me.
Yeah, Helmand is south, and then Valley of Death is in east. So yeah, those are like the two major areas that people have heard about. So we're mostly in there, and then sometimes the areas around it. My company alone and my platoon, actually, we were in almost, I think it was at roughly between 180 and 200 firefights in that time that we were there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it became routine to the point that it was almost daily. So most of us didn't think anything of it because it was part of our life. It was the middle of the night. You're not going to sleep. You're going to get shot.
How did that become part of your life?
That was it. Because that was.
How do you comprehend that? Because if I'm walking down the road where I live and somebody shoots at me, I'm probably not going to go out for about 6 months. And you're dealing with that. How do you? How do you normalize daily gunfights with the Taliban?
Yeah, I know. So not that is normal, but we were deployed. We were there to do a job. So the first couple of firefights, yeah, it was pretty shocking. And then when it suddenly just after a few months was our routine. It was like, okay, at some point today we're going to get shot at, or we're going to have an RPG fly by or a mortar come in. It's like it was so common that at some point we were going to be shooting at people because we were trying to survive. And it was just like our daily, it was like a routine for us.
Sounds like Vietnam. Vietnam.
Actually, I made a lot of comparisons afterward that it was very much like Vietnam, actually, because establishing those outposts, basically living in dirt the whole time. We didn't live in nice areas. We dug holes in the ground and lived in those, and we're out in the woods and we're having to set up traps, claymore mines and trip flares and everything that you would see in like the Vietnam era is stuff that we had to do. It was very primitive what we were doing. Very low tech, and so I could definitely say it compares to Vietnam. I don't know. Well, I think one of the major differences between us and the Vietnam era, though, was we had much better medical care than they did back then, and we also had better body armor too, including on our vehicles. So that saved a lot of people because getting hit in that body armor, you might sometimes break a rib or something, but you probably won't die. So, back in the day in Vietnam, the most that they'd usually have, or maybe a flak jacket, and that ain't stopping a bullet.
Jacket. I mean. No, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. What body armor would you have had then back then? What was the difference? What would you have had?
So we had, back then it was called an IBA system. I think it was, but it was pretty much the same body armor we use now. So it's basically a rifle rated ceramic plate. It's layers of ceramic that are in a very hard plate that sits on both sides that covers your vital organs. So the plate's good enough to withstand. Usually most of them can withstand about maybe 2 armor piercing 7.62 rounds, which is pretty much what the enemy would use. If they were to use an armor piercing one, it could withstand about 2 of them. One firefight, typically you get hit, you're going to know you're going down. But you're probably, you have a good chance of surviving if you're wearing that body armor. So, back in the Vietnam era, you get shot, you got shot. I mean, there was no stopping it. So,
yeah.
So I think that's what the biggest difference.
I mean, it's a massive difference there as well. And also, I'm going to assume that it wasn't the same mistake in Vietnam. I mean, because in Vietnam, Viet Cong knew that the Americans were coming because they could hear the choppers coming from miles away. So they're already waiting for him. Were you guys just like on foot predominantly, or were you being dropped a fair distance from where they would be?
No, I have to say that it was probably the same because the Afghans always knew when we were coming. Always. Because like those hills, they had ears and eyes everywhere we went. And the terrain was so rough, it's forest, it's vegetation and forests that are in mountains. So it's so easy for them to hide, and easily they could send scouts out, they could watch, and then, we had scanners with us, and we would pick up their intercoms they were using. And we would hear chatter, and all the time, if we were out, there'd be chatter all over the place saying the Americans are out there right here, and that's what they are. Like, and they would plan their ambushes. So they definitely, they knew we were there. There was like no getting around it.
I know. So you knew, soon as you landed, there's every chance you're going to be into a firefight.
Yeah, for the most part, in that area, definitely, because it was just, like I said, it was a hornet's nest. They were everywhere. And a lot of the locals, even if they weren't Taliban, a lot of locals were like opportunists, and the Taliban would say, we can pay you to shoot the Americans. Some of them would threaten their families if they didn't come after us. So a lot of the locals would be forced to fight against us as well because the Taliban were basically threatening. So it was like a very extremely hostile area that we were in. And there were locals that helped us too, and they were putting their lives at risk.
How are you dealing with it?
Like,
I've seen that.
I'm sorry, you said.
I mean, that's a lot. That's a lot to begin. And yeah, being in that environment on a daily basis, but just even being there, how does that affect your mental health?
So that one messed me up pretty bad. I was, especially because, there's no gradual ending to that sort of tour. It just abruptly ends. They're just one day is like, hey, we're going home, and that's it. It's over. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So reintegration isn't the easiest thing in the world, especially when you went from, 1,000 miles an hour to nothing out of nowhere. So
Yeah.
yeah, I dealt with post-traumatic stress a lot from that and survivor's guilt because I had a lot of my friends were killed on that deployment. But the problem was that, so I was still in the army at the time. And now at that point, it was 2007 when we came back from there. And that was about the height of the wars. So basically it was getting worse. Like the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq were getting much, much worse than they were before. So they were basically having to have more troops come in. So, and I still had a couple of years left in the army, which meant that no matter what, I was deploying again. There was no way out of it. So I decided to re-enlisted just because I wanted to go back to an airborne unit because I wanted to go back to a unit that I was more familiar with, just because I figured that would at least help because I knew I was going to deploy again anyway. So they sent me back to my airborne unit. I was paratrooper again. And then I had my third deployment, and that was in southern Afghanistan, mostly in Zabul and also Kandahar City, which was kind of a nasty place too. So third one was pretty bad, but I'd say I still can't say it was as bad as that. That second one was what did it. Like I lost all motivation to be a soldier anymore after that. Like I just wanted to get out.
What was it that took your motivation? Is it just the environment? Is it the way it was dealt with? You've got like your friends there that are getting killed. I mean, that enough is it in itself. But what do you think? What was there a particular? Did it just wear you down, or was there a particular point where you thought, yeah, you know what, I'll get out of here unscathed. I'm done. What happened there?
So it was that. Plus, yeah, I'm obviously burnt out from getting shot at all the time and having friends die. But it's also like at one point I'm like, look, like what's all this for? Like, why are we even doing this? I can tell you that the reason that we were in that, especially the Valley of Death, is the biggest thing that I could bring the light on, right? So the Korangal Valley, the reason that we occupied it was because there was about a 100-yard long lumber yard that was in the center of the valley, and there were some stacks of lumber there, and the lumber was being used by the locals in the Korangal Valley to trade off for weapons for the Taliban. They wanted to put an embargo on the lumber, so basically they sent Americans there to guard a 100-yard long lumber yard, about 100 meters. Wood. We were guarding wood. And as a result, 42 Americans were killed and about roughly 500 were wounded guarding wood. That was the entire purpose of being there. And I'm like, if we really didn't want them to trade out the lumber, we could drop a bomb on it. We could easily blow it up. Yeah. And every one of us said the same thing. You want us guarding wood, blow it up. So
seems really pointless.
Yeah. So like a lot of it was like, and it's the same thing they dealt with in Vietnam was like, okay, you're going to go take that hill, right? We don't know why you're taking the hill, but you're going to take it. Okay. Well, a bunch of us just got killed in the process. Well, we're done with that hill. Go away. You know what? That hill got worse. We're going to go back and take it again. All the same nonsense. It's like, it's a huge quagmire they had us in. And this war just seemed like it was going to go on forever. And it went on for a long time. Yeah. And we had no end state to the war at all. Like I was like, it was so pointless to me at this point. I'm like, my friends are getting killed for this, and I still don't understand why.
What was the point of going into Afghanistan? Was it bin Laden? Was it money? What was the reason? Because you had the weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, which didn't even exist.
Who knew that even in?
What were the real reasons for it?
So I know that Iraq would probably be the natural resources because they are, oil. They're very oil rich in Iraq, but Afghanistan, when it first started, it had a little more of a purpose. So basically what they found was, they blamed Al-Qaeda for the attacks in 9/11 and bin Laden took responsibility and said, yeah, that was Al-Qaeda. We did it. He's pretty much said that was us. So the idea was that they believed that the Taliban were harboring the Al-Qaeda terrorists inside Afghanistan.
Yeah.
So that the original reason for going in there was basically to take out the Taliban, take back over Afghanistan, and wipe out Al Qaeda. So
Yeah.
that was pretty much done by the CIA and then also an element of the Green Berets, the Army Special Forces.
Yeah.
They pretty much did that within the first few months of being there. And then what happened
Right.
was bin Laden had escaped into Pakistan
Yeah.
in the middle of them trying to get him.
Yeah.
And I think the hunt kind of continued after that. But I think so. What happened like after that was like, okay, well, at that point, in my opinion, that's pretty much it. Like, okay, what, now we can just try to find him. But they still had troops
Yeah.
there because what they wanted to do at that point is they wanted to do this whole nation building thing. They wanted us to put embassies in Afghanistan and like have them one of our allies and rebuild their country. And like, so it became like this, it's going to be like a peacekeeping mission to where we're going to help the Afghan people. But most of them didn't want us there. I wouldn't, well, maybe
Yeah.
most of them,
Yeah.
but a good portion of them, didn't really want us there. And the Taliban were
Yeah.
only making it worse because anyone that helped us were being threatened by the Taliban, and us leaving meant that they were going to possibly die, and a lot of them did.
Right.
I think we only made it worse by continuing that war for as long as it went.
So with the Taliban, it would have just gone on forever, though. They're never going to run out of people.
I mean, probably because the Taliban was a political movement. They're the ones that ran the
Yeah.
country.
Yeah.
And the idea, yeah, when we first went there, we knocked them all out, and then they escaped into Pakistan, and then that was it. And we were able to then hunt down bin Laden, but that became an issue because he was able to escape too. So
What did you think when bin Laden had escaped? Because it looked like there was like some sort of like ceasefire or something, and he escaped through the ceasefire, and off he went. Apparently he was in sight, and they could have killed him, but they said no.
No, I don't think so. Actually, the book I just wrote, I had to do some research on, and I actually was able to get some information from some of the special operations personnel that were actually there for that whole debacle.
Yeah.
And I guess what happened was the CIA actually did track him, and they knew he was there in that valley they were in, and they basically went in there. They had the U.S. Army's elite, they're the tier 1 special operations units. They went there with the CIA and basically, along with, I think, some Afghan counterparts. I think what the problem was that when they got there, they encountered much more resistance than they expected. So I think from what I understand, like to get to bin Laden, they had to go through like thousands and thousands and thousands of like these Taliban guys that were fighting off.
And there wasn't many of them.
Yeah, it's
I'm
like
sure I'll see that in the documentary.
Yeah, so
Americans,
and the Americans probably killed at one point. They probably killed all of them because we had air support. They were dropping bombs from planes, all that stuff. But it's still it's rugged terrain. You're not going to kill all of them doing that. You got to go through them.
No.
Yeah, it keeps on going. So I think what happened was because of how the long duration of trying to fight through all them gave him ample opportunity to escape. Is what happened.
Right.
And I think that's what it seems like to me. And that's kind of what I got from hearing it from some of the guys that were there.
Yeah. Did it bother you at the time? Were you just there doing your job, or did you, when you heard that bin Laden had escaped, you like, I can't believe this has happened? How did you take it, or were you just focused on what you had to do where you were?
Well, that actually happened before I came in, because that was when they first went to Afghanistan in 2001, and I think the Tora Bora incident, which is when he escaped, I think that was in 2002, and I had just enlisted in late 2002. So that's why, I ended up going to Iraq first, because that was kind of like, okay, Afghanistan's over, we're going to Iraq. So I ended up in Iraq first, and Afghanistan I went back to when it escalated. So, then I had my third deployment in Afghanistan. So yeah, I spent 35 months total in combat. And by the time I was done with it, I was happy to get out and not ever have to go to war again.
Yeah. You were saying about like, one day you're there, next day that you're back. And again, I remember like reading books, documentaries on Vietnam veterans that the 1 minute they're in the jungle, next minute they're like back in the city. And even that transfer is they've really struggled with that. Was that the same for yourself?
Basically
integrating back.
So my first deployment was my first taste of it, because Iraq was still rough. I mean, it wasn't back in the beginning of Iraq, it probably wasn't as bad, because I think what happened was they got smart and they started using those like the directed projectile IEDs against Americans, and it wasn't so prevalent at the time when I was there. So it was more like direct action. We were kicking in doors and searching buildings and looking for bad guys, basically. So in all actuality, like I was trained to do a job, right? When I went to Iraq, I got to do the job, and really we didn't have a lot of our people get killed, and no one that was close with me died. So to me, it was kind of fun. It's like, it's like being on a
Right.
football team. You train to do something, you get to go do it, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so that's why I was like,
Yeah.
yeah, that wasn't so bad. And like, it sucked. The heat, that place is no joke. That place is rough. Like, those cities, westernized cities, like they are nothing that we've ever seen before, but the heat is no joke. But coming back from that, I remember, yeah, it was like, it felt like night and day. Like I just out of nowhere, I was back in the US. I was stationed out of North Carolina at the time. And the first thing
Yeah.
I got off the plane and one of my friends was waiting for me. And, um, he's like, how was Iraq? And I'm like, I don't know. I'm not even sure what to say right now. He's like, oh, want to go get a beer? I'm like, yeah, let's go get a beer. So like, just trying to figure my life out at that point. Like, oh, I'm back to normal. This is weird.
How long do you reckon it took you to get back to normal?
So that one, not too long. I mean, probably a couple of weeks. But so the second deployment that where the Valley of Death and all that stuff, that was a whole different ball game. So I came back from that,
Yeah.
and I was not all there at all. Like I only remember bits and pieces of the homecoming because of how like out of my own head I was. I couldn't comprehend where I was or what I was doing. Like I was like, I mean, look like I'm so paranoid looking around waiting for someone to shoot at me. And then like I was greeted on this is the worst part. I was greeted on the deployment. My family was there, my mom and my sister, and I think that was it. But they greeted me off the plane. And in the process of the homecoming, I'm running into some of the guys that got sent home that were badly wounded. Like I had a few that almost died, and they had like I remember one was a good friend of mine who he took a machine gun round through his thigh and it shattered his femur. And it blew out the back of his femoral artery. He almost died. He lost a lot of marrow and blood in the process. So I saw him walking with a cane, and he had lost probably about almost 100 pounds at the time. Like he was very skinny in and
Yeah,
out of
yeah.
hospital procedures. So I remember seeing that, and I'm just like, Jesus Christ! Like, the only thing that I could think was like I didn't so much as get a scratch on me while I was there. How, like, why am I okay and they're not? Like, I don't understand. And that's one thing that's very hard to comprehend. They call it survivor's
Yeah,
guilt.
absolutely. Survivor's guilt. I mean, do you attribute that to luck, training? Yeah. And with
Absolutely.
the survivor's guilt, I've read about it, whether it's like people that were held in like in Auschwitz and survived it and all the people that
Mhm.
were out, but you hear it of like people on the Titanic who committed
Oh yeah.
suicide afterwards there, and obviously people in the armed forces. What was your struggle with it? When did you think, do you know, I'm struggling with survivor's guilt? Did you even know it? We just feeling bad that you survived? How is survivor's guilt?
So it was really hard to deal with for a long time.
Yeah.
It what happened was it made me unable to see a future.
Yeah.
Like basically it made me assume that I was going to be dead within 24 hours pretty much. Like so it was kind of like living in a 24-hour cycle all the time. And to some extent it still lingers a little bit, but not as bad because I've managed to find, outlets since then, getting out of the army is when I started actually learning how to adapt and be a normal person again. And, not just
How did you go about that?
so it took a while. When I first got out, I was a mess. I didn't really have a plan or anything, but what happened was I started college, and being back on a routine helped a little bit. And then I think the biggest outlet for me was writing. But the problem was that I kind of screwed myself up a little bit more because all I kept thinking when I was in college was I just want that, like when I was in the military, we had structure, you know, and I think I just wanted that again. So I'm just like, you know what, I just need a job, like to hell with this. And I dropped out of college and I went to the police academy, and I served 11 years as a law enforcement officer. And basically being a law enforcement officer is kind of like going back to war. I mean, I'm carrying a gun again and, and all that. So
What's that like? Being where were you based? Where were you a police officer? Was that in Florida?
yes. So, in Florida,
Right.
I was mostly in Central Florida and in some of the greater areas of Orlando, basically, like where Disney is and all that. Mostly in really rough areas, and then I moved over to be a deputy sheriff out here. I live out on the Space Coast now, so it's on the Atlantic coast of Florida. The main reason I
Right.
moved out here was just because I'm like, why would I live in Florida and not live near the beach? It just didn't make sense to me.
Of course. Yeah, yeah,
So I wanted to move over to the beach.
yeah.
So that's what I did. But so I moved. I was a deputy sheriff here for a long time, and I got to say, like, this is where I finally realized that this wasn't helping. Like basically that my mental health was on the decline being a law enforcement officer, and I needed to hang up the sword and stop because all I did was put a band-aid on it, all the PTSD and survivor's guilt I had. And I put a long 12-year band-aid on it at this point. That wasn't helping. All it was doing was suppressing, you know? So it wasn't the job itself. So basically going to war made being a cop easy. I mean,
I
like,
can imagine.
yeah. So the stuff that I dealt with as a cop, there were some dangerous situations. I had to shoot somebody one time as a cop. And I actually had a friend of mine get killed that was a cop. Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
How are,
I did.
how are you dealing with that compared to, is it, oh, I've got no idea. You're in Afghanistan, you're shooting at people at a daily basis. Yeah. And then you're in the streets of Florida and it's like
Yeah.
similar. But I mean, is there like a comparison there? Is it completely different?
There is, and that's the thing is working in some of those high crime areas, you're kind of surrounded all the time. Like you don't know, like it seems like everyone is okay with you. Like most people want cops, like they want help, right? And they want to keep crime off the streets. But then the bad elements they're very small bad elements that are mixed in with everyone else. And you don't know who's who.
Right.
So it's kind of similar to how it was in Afghanistan, except that we're not constantly getting shot at. Like we're not,
No.
but it's just kind of like paranoia, right? So I had been a cop for a few years, I think
Yeah.
like 5 years or so. And then a friend of mine that I went to the academy with, he was killed in the line of duty at the department I worked in. And that was probably when I should have quit law enforcement because I think that was when I realized I was like, like this job can be dangerous too. And I didn't want to have to come home from war and have to deal with my friends getting killed all over again, you know?
No. Yeah. Yeah.
So, but I decided to keep going. I think I want to say it was like a year after that, not even maybe a few months after that or something. That I got into a shooting, and luckily none of us got hurt. But I shot the guy that shot at us, which I thought nothing of it. It was just kind of I'm like I was doing my job. That's all it was. Yeah. And then finally I was like, yeah, I'll keep on going. I moved over to the Space Coast, and aside from all that I just told you, really the job wasn't that bad. I mean, I had like it was kind of fun. Like it's problem solving and I like writing. I have to write reports, which isn't as fun as writing a book, but
Yeah.
like building a rapport and stuff. Like most people like you when you're a cop, like they want you there. And and some of the fun, like the tactical stuff we got to do, like like say we have like a wanted person inside a house, and we're like making it. It's kind of like being in Iraq. We're making the announcements and trying to call them out. Then we're like clearing the building, and yeah, so some of it was kind of fun. And so what the problem was law enforcement, at least in the United States. I'm not sure how it is over in Britain, but in the United States, the law enforcement is very, very political, where it's overrun by basically most of it is like career politicians in uniform that are kind of out for themselves, and they don't care about the people they're protecting. They just want their own image and their money in their pocket. A lot of them get kickbacks, and there's a lot of corruption. And I just kept on like the more proactive I was, the more attention I got from them, and it was never good attention. It just got worse and worse and worse to the point that I basically I ended up finally I quit out of nowhere. I just put all my stuff in a box and walked over to the nearest precinct and
Yeah.
give me an on duty sergeant. And I handed my stuff and said I quit.
Yeah.
And then so now I'm immediately afterward, I started working as a independent contractor as a counselor for veterans, where I'm helping veterans increase like VA disability claims, and I'm writing. So I'm basically able to do two things that I liked in the first place, right? Where creative writing was always my thing because I grew up around that. My parents were in the entertainment industry when I was growing up. Storytelling was kind of my life before all of the carrying a gun and going to war. But all of that stuff that I did gave me a lot of stories to tell. So now it's easy for me to write all kinds of stuff. Um, that's where within a month I wrote this book that just came out, The Last Gunfighter.
Yeah.
And then I have three more manuscripts I just finished. They're waiting to be published right now. So I'm able to
Yeah.
yeah, it's great. Writing is the biggest therapy for me, journaling and everything. And that really is what I needed was just getting it on paper and talking about my feelings.
Yeah.
And now I can write stories that are cathartic, that are based on some personal experience, but they're also good fiction stories and they're entertaining as well. So
As a
yeah,
therapist, it's one of the things that I get a lot of clients to do is to get writing, journaling,
yeah,
because you get more out of writing than you do talking there. And I've got a lot of people that's come on the podcast been brilliant, and a lot of them are authors. And when they tell their story, every one of them says, "I got so much out of writing. I felt so much better. Weights lifted. So there's so much there." What was the point for yourself that you decided I'm going to write a book? Was there a moment, or was it always on your mind?
So I started writing when I first got out of the army because I wanted to write a book about my experiences. And I actually did. I had a memoir published. It wasn't the best writing because I had no education at the time. But I went, because I grew up around, my dad was a film producer and my mom was a Broadway performer. I grew up around that kind of storytelling. And I always like they wanted me to go to acting classes and all kinds of stuff when I was a kid, right? They gave me the name Jared Maxwell because it sounded like a thespian name, right? And so I have a Hollywood name because they wanted me to be an actor, but I was more about the behind the scenes stuff that my dad was doing. I was more interested in that. And I liked the idea of like the guys that I met that were writing screenplays and writing drawing storyboards. That kind of thing interested me. So I just found that I kind of learned to have a knack for storytelling. So when I got out, what I was studying in college was creative writing and a little bit of psychology. Actually, I have a little bit of education in that. So
It's a good combination.
yeah, so the creative writing, yeah, that's what I want to do is write. And being in law enforcement, I started to write a little bit, but I was always so burnt out on writing reports, especially when you work in those rough areas. You're constantly writing reports. There's so much crime that it just kind of took away from my creative side because I just didn't want to write. I don't want to sit behind a computer, on my off time. So getting away from it, when I was dealing with all that political nonsense, I actually ended up on administrative leave for God, like 4 months straight, I think. And I'm like, I'm not going to lose my mind.
Yeah.
And I'm going to do something, for myself. And I wanted to tell the story. So I started writing this book and I basically drew up a character. I used my education from creative writing to do this. So basically the way I learned it in creative writing is you draw a character first. You make flaws in the character and a backstory. And then you come up with what you would want the ending for this character to be. Would it be a tragic ending? Would it be a happy ending? Things like that. And then write out an ending. And then from there, decide how the story is going to get to that point. So, and that's how I did it. So what I ended up doing was I took a few months out of my time in the process of all that to reach out to some people because I wanted to do some research first. So there's a lot of military themes in the book and a lot of law enforcement themes. I know everything about law enforcement. I definitely know law, especially Florida and United States law. Military, I can say I know pretty much everything that I would need to know. And I'm very, as far as tactics, shooting, weapons handling, martial arts, like all the martial stuff that we learned, all the fighting and shooting and tactical stuff. I am well versed in that, right? I definitely know how to do all that stuff. And I can definitely write about it and make it realistic. But when I wrote the book, I wanted the theme to be post-traumatic stress disorder. And the way I wanted the story to go was severe post-traumatic stress. So I had pretty bad, but I wanted it to be the worst case imaginable because the idea was in the United States, post-traumatic stress has been kind of overused lately, where it's not really a misdiagnosis. It's more like a self-diagnosis as people are just saying because they have trauma in their life. Yeah, they automatically
get it here in the UK.
So same thing. And I wanted to make an example of what real PTSD looks like and to tell them, look, it's nothing to be proud of. You shouldn't be you should get help. It's something you need help for. It's bad.
Yeah.
So I wanted to show what it's really like, the flashback episodes, the reliving the incidents, everything that's involved. And I wanted to be the most severe case I could think of. So in the US military, during the global war on terror, the PTSD rates were the highest among the higher level units that were going to war. So the infantry guys that I was doing infantry and airborne and stuff like that. That's one of the combat arms aspects. And yeah, there's definitely PTSD and we saw a lot of combat. But the ones that saw it the most were the tier 1 special operations. So in this case, we have a unit that is called Delta Force in the United States. Okay. Yeah. So in Delta Force back in the 70s was actually initially brought on as they were trained by the British. SAS. SAS, yeah. Because the United States wanted their own counter terrorism unit, kind of like that. So since then, they've been professionalized. They're a lot different than they used to be. They are no joke. Arguably, they're one of the most elite units in the entire world, and everyone knows it.
Because you've got loads of elite units, though, in America.
We do. So basically, the tier 1 elements have, it's called the intelligence support activities at the very top. That's the number 1 tier, highest tier unit for intelligence gathering in the United States. And they basically are a mix of both intel and usually Army Green Berets that are put into the unit. Because they have the most experience when it comes to that. And they're basically a unit that can basically conduct their own intel work and they can also act on their own intel work. So if they get actionable intel, they can take action on what they want. Just under them is they have the number one premier strike force in the United States is Delta Force. A little bit parallel to them is what's called DevGru, is the Navy version. It's SEAL Team 6 is what they call it. That's a group of Navy SEALs that are very similar to Delta Force. The only difference between them is Delta Force recruits out of all branches of the military, including out of the Navy SEALs. But Delta Force is kind of considered like because they've been around longer and they're able to work pretty much the same missions. The Delta Force is still considered the very top. And then it would be SEAL Team after that. And then Air Force has one that does reconnaissance and stuff. And then there's also the Army. Army Rangers have their own Tier 1 element that does reconnaissance and direct action. So yeah, those are the top ones. But I wanted to go with, the guys that saw the most action at the time was Delta Force. So during the Iraq War, Delta basically got because of how dangerous Iraq was, and they were like, we're hunting Saddam Hussein. That's no joke. And they had terrorist elements going there too. And we're working nothing in cities the entire time. And urban combat and hostage rescue is what they specialized in. So these guys were mostly working in Iraq at the time. They captured Saddam Hussein. That was them who did it.
The Delta Force that caught.
And that was al-Baghdadi, the leader of ISIS. That was them who killed him. So it was the very top targets. It was usually them and sometimes SEAL Team 6. SEAL Team 6 is credited with killing Osama bin Laden. So you see, they kind of work hand in hand.
Is SEAL Team 6 above your regular Navy SEALs, which is still obviously top tier? Okay.
They're a counterterrorism element of the Navy
right.
SEALs. Yeah, they're no joke. They are
No, definitely not.
So basically Delta Force, they had about a 50% casualty rate in Iraq. Roughly 50% of them were either dead or wounded that deployed to Iraq. That's how dangerous their job was.
It's insane because if you've got like British Special Forces, which is like the SAS or the SBS, whenever they do, whenever they, not that I know that much, but whenever they do like a raid or something like that, there's never like a casual. I mean, the only ones I can remember is
because I know firsthand, we've seen some of them get killed. So yeah, I mean, sometimes
like if you go back to the early 90s, the only one that really stands out is like your Bravo 20, where there was some casualties because of false information.
I read that book. It was great.
Everyone's read that book.
A lot. That was great.
Well,
that's a good example. They were a small reconnaissance element, and they were basically overrun and got captured. No, so it was because the nature of the job that they were doing was insane. I mean,
the casual because. Usually they do like they do something, and casualty rate will tend to be a minimum.
Right.
When do you ever hear of like special forces losing 50% of their men? So what they must have been under must have been unbelievable.
That's why it was insane, because Iraq at the time, I mean, the danger level there was really high, especially with those urban areas. And think of what Delta Force does, right? And it was similar. We did the same thing in what I did. It's just that they do it to a higher level and much more dangerous targets. Putting explosives on a door, the door explodes, and then we have to first search the inside of that house or building, and we don't know what's around every corner. We don't know what's behind every door. In their case, they were going after the very top level targets, and they expected much resistance.
Right.
As a result, when they say you're in a true close quarter battle situation, they say roughly about 50% is the acceptable casualty rate if you're in that kind of situation. The Battle of Fallujah was just like that. Back in Vietnam, the Battle of Hue City and all that. I mean, so it was expected, I guess, but because of that, Delta Force and the United States Special Forces, the Green Berets, they had the highest PTSD rates and also a lot of the highest suicide rates as a result.
Really?
Yeah. So I wanted to learn a little bit more about how Delta Force works so I could write this book. So I had to do all this. Everything I'm telling you is based on research. I didn't know much about them.
Right.
I knew some people that worked in there in special operations and everything, but I had to kind of learn from them how it worked. So I had to learn how basically the kind of tactics they use, and like to some extent, and what their techniques are and kind of what the culture's like. Like I want to learn a little bit about the culture so I can get it right in the book.
There must be a specific type of person that's in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I learned pretty much everything I needed to know about it. I learned everything. So and I found that it was true. Most of the guys I talked to dealt with severe PTSD. They went through absolute hell. And one of the main reasons for that is because, the major elements of the military deploy in waves, right? The special operations there were no breaks. It was just mission after mission after mission. It never ended because, who else is going to do all these direct action raids on
Sustainable though, as a therapist sat in my chair, that's not sustainable. You catch up on you. You're going to get burnt out
That's the
mentally,
thing is, so Delta
physically.
Force is known to have a very toxic culture because of that, because basically what they do is, they still do rotations and deployments, but when they go to deployment, they don't stop. It's endless. They just keep on kicking in doors and left and right, right? A lot of the times you take casualties, but the problem is that you're still on an operation. Like you still have a job to do and you're going to keep going. And, there wasn't a whole lot of time for R&R after you're taking casualties and stuff like that. So yeah, it definitely is enough that'll take a toll on your mental health. And it's a very professionalized situation that you're in. So it's not a lot of downtime. It's more like, no, we're here to do a job and that's what we do. Right.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
that's why I wanted to.
as a therapist, for me, my brain automatically reverts to default. So as soon as I speak to somebody that's ex-armed forces, my brain's automatically going, oh, PTSD straight away. I don't even know what they've done in that, but I'm assuming that.
Wouldn't say everyone, but yeah,
No, absolutely, absolutely. But your brain defaults to that. And the thing is, as a human, we're not designed to see people blown up, getting killed, our friends and stuff. And it can only affect us. So to come away from that, did the American government or armed forces assume they're going to be okay? Is there any care for them at all, especially if you've got a suicide rate?
So there are more now than there were before. I think the war on terror is kind of what brought more to light on the PTSD and special operations. So I think, obviously there's the VA and all that stuff you can go to, but they do have a lot of programs that are specifically meant for people who have been through that level of fighting.
Yeah.
That they can get help. So yeah, that is a thing. But, again, that wasn't me. I didn't do that. I had PTSD.
Yeah.
I didn't have to do the stuff they did. Is no joke.
No. With all the information you've got ready for your book, where did that sort of take you? Was that what you expected? Was it completely different?
For the most part, it was. But some of the stuff I learned I didn't expect to hear some of it. I'm like, this is insane. Like the stuff they do, and also like the level of training these guys have. I've never seen anything like it. These guys are trained for accuracy and speed, right? And when I say that, it's like me personally, I'm a pretty good shot, right? But when I'm running at full speed, thing at a moving target, it's not. I don't think I can hit it. I mean, those bullets are going to go all over the place, right?
Yeah. So
these guys are trained basically to the point where when they go on an operation, from the outside looking in, what it looks like is they get off the helicopter, and they run. And they don't stop running until the building is cleared. I mean, they just run all the way through and tear it up. So that's how fast and accurate they are. And, it's about a 6-month, more like a year, but it's like they have a selection process, which is similar to what the British SAS do. And then they have what's called an OTC that is about a little over 6 months.
I'd love to know what the selection process is, how many they start with and how many they've left that make it through. I'd love to. Yeah, go. Yeah, please do.
Yeah, I learned it. It was, so they have 2 year and 2 classes a year. Maybe usually, I knew a lot of guys that put in for it. I know a lot of guys that went, and I know maybe 3 or 4 that ever actually made it in. So, it's about, maybe it could be a few hundred to 1,000 that will put in the applications for it. They will take about 120 for the class, right? They'll say these are the best candidates, right? So 120, they go to West Virginia, and they go through the selection process. It's probably it's one of the roughest selection processes you could ever
imagine.
It's very similar to what the British SAS do. So by the end of that, from what I understand, usually they have about between 10 and 20 that have made it to the end of the course.
Originally starting off about 1,000, 1,200, 10, 20.
Yeah. So, and out of that, some of them don't even get selected. Sometimes it's 0.
So it's 0.
Yeah. So after that course is done, they have to go through a psychological eval and then a board. And then the board is basically high ranking operators who have been doing this job for a long time, who are evaluating you to decide if you're a good fit. And no one really knows what they're looking for, but they're going to grill you with questions and see what you're made of. And from what I understand, everyone that I talked to said usually it's like between 5 and 10 around there that will finally get selected out of all that. Usually maybe about 10, but sometimes it's 0, sometimes it's 2 or 1, because they only want the best.
Right.
So now that whoever made it out of that, you have 10 out of that, then maybe you had 5 or 10 out of the next class, right? That small group now goes to they get put into the operator training course, and then they go through a 6-month pipeline, and about 50% don't make it through that.
Yeah. So you've done all of that.
Yeah.
Like, you're going to have to explain this one to me. Apart from like your David Goggins that joins the Navy SEALs and your Jocko
Right.
Willits to like, I'm going to achieve this. Why do people join the Delta Force? Is it to see if they could do it? What reasons are they going to want to do that? Bearing in mind what they're up against.
So again, I was never in Delta Force, so I can't say firsthand, but I know that.
I think you'll be accurate enough.
But I think that everyone that I've talked to that went into it, it's because it was a job they wanted to do. So, you know, and I get it, because for a while I wanted to be a Green Beret. There were things that I wanted to do that I lost motivation for because of combat. But
Yeah.
you know, obviously it's a dangerous job, but it's also a very rewarding job. It's very, you know, if you like the tactical aspects of stuff, you know, like basically hostage rescue and searching a building, there's a lot of problem solving and like math behind it that, like, it actually, like, to people that think like that, it's actually kind of fun for them. You know, it's like, it's kind of a job that you would enjoy doing. And, you know, that's the reason that they have so few that actually make it through, because when you're in one of those Saber squadrons with the assault squadrons that they have for Delta Force, you're in a small group of guys that all want to do the job, and they don't care if they get shot or not. They just want to do the job. They are there to do it. I mean, that's all of them. That's the way it is.
So this is like pretty much every person is like for like. You're not going to go, well, he's a bit different, because they've whittled it down and you have to tick all of those boxes to fit those criteria.
Exactly. These are guys that want to do the job and that are motivated to do it. They're like, this is my calling. My calling is to do hostage rescue and counterterrorism, you know, like take out the biggest bad guys in the world. Right. And they do some other stuff too, but that's like the primary though. That's the end goal of what they do. But yeah, so that's what I've seen, and they love it. Everyone I know loved it, but they do.
I can imagine they've got that far, and you know,
the problem is that when you get out of that situation, you know, where do you go from there?
Where do you go from there?
You're one of the 500 arguably most elite soldiers in the entire world.
What do you
go from that to nothing? You know?
Yeah. So and I remember like watching Rambo back in the day. Yeah, because it was at the end of the film, he was saying that in Vietnam, he had all these like $1 million pieces of equipment, but yet he couldn't hold down a car wash job in
a lot of vets have gone through the same thing. And I don't know if have you ever, just going back on Rambo for a second, have you ever read the book First Blood?
I've not read the book. I've only seen the movie.
So the movie's great movie. Yeah. I love the movie.
I love that.
Really well done, and it really. So the movie had a little bit of a different spin on it, because Sylvester Stallone did not want Rambo to be kind of an anti-hero, or he didn't want him to be looked in a negative light, because at the time that book came out during the time post-Vietnam when a lot of these veterans were homeless and they were committing suicide, and the book made it kind of seem like it was a dead end for them.
Right.
Now, and maybe that wasn't really the purpose of the book, but the book was very good. Where basically, in the book, Sheriff Teasel was actually just as complex as John Rambo. Sheriff Teasel was a generational difference. Sheriff Teasel was actually a Korean War veteran who also received a Distinguished Service Cross. So he was a war hero. But the generation of the Korean War was, okay, the war's over. It doesn't matter what you went through. Nobody cares. And you're going to go to work and you're going to make a life for yourself. Right. And you're never going to talk about the war again. That's kind of like what it was. And everyone was I think people were generally tougher back then. It's just the culture was just was more like, yeah, we don't care. Like, get to work, you know? So, because of that, so that's the way he was. And he's now a sheriff of a small town. Right. And John Rambo was the younger generation of Vietnam vets that were coming out, and they all had a very bad lack of respect for authority, because they no longer trusted their country, because they got spit on when they got off planes. They got treated like total shit, right? So the only thing that they find out later in the book was that, yeah, John Rambo was also a Green Beret, and he was a Medal of Honor recipient. So the two had a lot in common, except that John Rambo just had that much higher level of training is all. But in the book, he's much more violent.
Yeah.
The sheriff the sheriff was nice to him in the book. Actually, he wasn't a total dick. He was empathetic, right? And he was trying to tell him, look, I'll take you somewhere out of town, because he was actually causing problems when he was in town.
All right. Not like in the movie.
Right, exactly. Right. So, and he takes him out of town. I think it was 5 times that basically Rambo was like, well, I've been kicked out of so many towns. I'm tired of this shit. And he basically says, to hell with this. I'm going back in. He goes back in. And at one point, the sheriff's like, look, I'll buy you a burger at the other burger shop. I'll buy you a burger, but then you got to leave. Right? And it keeps going back and forth to the point the sheriff, he forces his hand. He has to arrest him. Right. Because he's just like, we can't do this anymore. And that's when it all goes to shit, where basically Rambo, he was a POW in Vietnam and started to lose it, just like in the movie. The difference is in the movie, he was controlled about what he did. In the book, he is straight up murdering people.
Really?
Yeah, he's like the first thing he did, I think it was a straight razor. He grabbed off a cop and off a deputy, and he like eviscerates the deputy with it. So things like that were different. And the book ended very tragically. And that was the big difference. But so I just say I always recommend it because I love the
Yeah,
movie
absolutely.
and I love the book because they're both great. They're just so much different. And they're two very good.
I think I'm going to go and buy. I think after this, I'm going to go and buy it.
I would say or get an ebook or whatever. Yeah, but yeah, it's a great book. So anyway, so the Last Gunfighter. Before I start
Yeah,
talking about other people's books,
it's right. I'm desperate to hear yours because
so
there's so much that's gone into this book. So
right.
yeah, tell me about it.
So roughly 3 months of research, and then I was able to start writing. And less than a month of writing is what it took for me to write it. So it's about 390 pages what I was able to write in less than a month.
You didn't
I was
stop.
ready to write. I was ready
You didn't stop.
because I knew exactly how the story was going to go. The difference is
Okay.
that I wanted to, because I know the personal experience I'm going to put in there and some of that, but I wanted to make sure that I had it down when it came to the special operations side of it. So the book basically chronicles the life of a badly wounded Delta Force operator named Nick Rogers. Nick Rogers is basically an absolute god when it comes to combat, right? He is like the ultimate soldier, right? He has learned how to be a true war fighter. He is great at it. He's very calm and collected. And he loves his job until an incident happens where he's wounded to the point that he almost dies, and that takes him out of the fight. And they basically tell him you can't be in an assault squadron anymore. And they said maybe in a couple of years, and then he kind of says, "To hell with this, I'll just get out." And now like I said, it's reintegration now, right? He's going from 1,000 miles an hour to nothing, and tries to basically reinvent himself. So back in the States, he was always a thrill seeker, and that's how he kind of went into that profession. So now it's been exacerbated because of the fact that he's been to war. So what he was before he went to war was a surfer. He grew up surfing, right? And surfing is, I surf. It's pretty fun. It's exciting, but it'll never it'll never have the same flavor
No,
as bullet going by your head.
no, no.
Not knowing if you're going to die is the ultimate rush. And it's true. It really is. Right.
Yeah.
And so the problem is that he doesn't realize he's actually sustained by adrenaline, and his PTSD is only going to get worse if he doesn't do something about it. So he tries to reinvent himself. And because he has sustained TBI from an explosion he was in, a traumatic brain injury, they would not accept him into federal agencies like the CIA and all that stuff. So he just says, you know what? I'm going to go into local law enforcement because it means I get to carry a gun again and I can use my tactics, right? So he becomes a street cop, a regular old street cop, right? And I can tell you right now, I've known a lot of Green Berets and Army Rangers and some Navy SEALs actually that became street cops, and they were usually the best cops. Now, I have never known one
so far advanced to anyone else.
Yeah. So, and I've never known one though that was a tier 1 operator, because most of the time they don't want to carry guns anymore when they get out, or
They're done.
yeah, or maybe they want to do something more like investigative side, like CIA, things like that. And most of them don't even do that. Most of the ones I know that retire, they'll open like a training company and teach civilians how to shoot, things like that. So him going to law enforcement is already like, anyone that knows psychology knows that's probably a bad idea. Right. So especially in his mental state. So he has his best friend growing up is a guy that I put in, another character named Sam. Sam was an Army Ranger, and he was getting ready to leave the Army. And he tells him straight up, he's always like the voice of reason. He's like, "No, Nick, don't do this. Like, you don't want to carry a gun again." He's like, cops are peacekeepers. You're a gunfighter, is what he tells him. Like, cops are not gunfighters. They're peacekeepers. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's basically where it starts. So basically he takes his skills and he becomes a phenomenal street cop. But the problem is he's sustained by adrenaline, and he ends up in a situation where a friend of his dies, and he goes back through the PTSD episodes again and realizes like at one point, the person that killed his partner, he wants to kill him. And he uses his training from Delta Force where, he used to eliminate targets for a paycheck, right? He's like, I'm doing this. And he goes straight out, he overrides everyone. He's like, I'm going to kill this son of a bitch. And that's what he does. And then that's when it all kicks off. Now it's like, okay.
That's when it all kicks off. To me, it's kicked off a while ago.
It did, but that's when it really starts. Because now you realize like he needs that adrenaline. He needs that rush. He wants to get shot. Right. So what happens is the book goes into a split timeline. You show an absolute chaotic modern life he has, including a failed marriage as well. And then it goes past and present. So the split timeline, the past shows when he was a young operator in Delta Force, and how he became a legend on the battlefield, right? And you go back and forth, and basically you're seeing like how it all led up to this and how he became such a bad son of a bitch. Plus, everything that he had to go through as an operator that was just taking a toll on him. And then what happens is in the end, it all comes together. Like the timelines kind of converge at the end to some extent.
Right.
And then you see, okay, like the ending really just culminates in an absolute explosive climax. So yeah, that's pretty much it. So it's about PTSD. There's a very heavy romantic side to it too. He has a romantic interest where it's based on personal experience. It's more like trauma bonding.
I was going to say, I can imagine it's going to be complicated.
Yeah. So basically, this is actually based on something that I went through, and the
Sure.
person he falls in love with after his divorce is based on actually an ex girlfriend of mine. And I never meant anything bad against her. I sent her a free copy of the book actually and said, look, like I didn't mean anything bad. It was such a good idea for a character. That's all it was, right? Like don't take any offense. But so the character is based on her because the idea is that she also was very complex, kind of like how Nick was in the book, where Nick is trauma bonding with her because she has something going on where she's a cop. She's a SWAT team member as a cop, and she's in it for the adrenaline just like he is because she has a troubled past. And she deals with, she's a former survivor of narcissistic abuse. And because of that, she had like some Stockholm syndrome lingering.
Right.
And that leads to other things too. So, and he has severe PTSD. So the two of them, obviously, yeah. So now it's like
Yeah.
putting two bad chemicals together. It's probably not going to end that well. But so that's kind of what leads toward that climax where you start to see like something bad is going to happen very soon. And you
Yeah.
really start to see it becomes more ominous. And then, yeah, it goes absolutely insane toward the end. So,
Yeah. How did you enjoy writing that book? Was it easy to write? You knew what you're
yeah,
going to do. You said a lot of fun doing it.
it was really fun. The only challenging parts were the parts that I wrote about Delta Force because I had to be very meticulous in my writing. The other stuff I know so well that I was able to flow really well. But the Delta Force chapters were really fun to write because I got, I got to learn kind of how they would do certain operations and kind of I would plan my own operation and kind of like role play it and then put it on paper. Yeah. So I used some good examples. I had a direct action raid. I had a hostage rescue, a VIP extraction, and then there was an assassination was one of them. That was probably the most fun one to write actually.
They're all fun things to write
Yeah,
about.
exactly.
So this book's out now, and you've got manuscripts for 3 more.
Yep. I have,
Okay.
yep, 3 more. And then my publisher basically said, send them when you're ready. So I'm just kind
So
of
what?
waiting because this one literally just came out. So I needed to build some steam for a few months before I release another one. Right.
Yeah,
Because
yeah, of
it's so
course.
new that I'm barely even seeing reviews yet. I think I'm just starting to see some. So I need to give it a few months before it really picks up steam. And then once it does that, then I'll release the next book.
Okay.
So, and it's
And
not a series.
yeah, it's not so the other books that you're going to have coming out, are they completely different characters? Are they the same theme?
Yeah. So me personally, I am not really big on writing sequels.
They're
If I
very
plan
rarely
out
as good as the first.
That's the
Right.
problem. And I understand the formula. They call it the James Cameron formula, right? James Cameron is a god when it comes to sequels, and everyone knows that, right? So you remember back in the 80s, Terminator, right?
Yeah, and then obviously Terminator 2,
Terminator 2 was better than
92.
Terminator, right?
Yeah. I don't know.
Um, so well, okay, no, I mean I'd say they were, yeah, but still,
You've got
Terminator
people
2,
I've got a lot of mates that like
yeah.
Terminator 2 more
And
than one,
he
but
used a
yeah,
specific formula for that. And in the process of that, my favorite movie of all time, because I grew up around film, was actually Alien.
great film, 1979.
Great. Yeah,
Yeah.
1979. Sigourney Weaver's first ever film she was ever in.
So the first ever film she was in, she was brilliant in
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, she was, I think she was a thespian before that actually. But, and then James Cameron made Aliens.
Yeah.
And Aliens is still to this day is like the most amazing film I've ever seen that is so like, it's so timeless and everything about it is like so well written and perfectly made. And it's like, it really did so much justice for Alien that it almost made Alien, the original, even better, having that as a
Yeah.
sequel, you know?
Yeah.
So that is really hard to do. It's very hard to accomplish. And I give him a lot of credit for that. Me personally, I understand how the formula would work, but if I were to write something that is meant to be a series, that's the only time that I would really want to write a sequel. I'm more about like a book, a story that is like its own like standalone story that is very well put together.
Yeah. Me, I'd be wishing for a sequel, but hoping they don't because the
Yeah.
first film or whatever is so
And
good.
now I was a little open to a sequel to some extent on one of the books I wrote, so I might, but The Last Gunfighter, I don't want to give away how it ends.
Sure, sure.
but it doesn't really leave it open for a sequel.
Sure.
But it does leave plenty open for spin-offs, like a loose follow-up.
Yeah, and the thing is nowadays spin-offs are really good. If you look at Power and the
Exactly.
spin-offs to those, like with Tommy and
Yeah.
right, yeah, they're really, really good. So back in the day they were terrible. Nowadays, so if you've got strong characters that you can take from it, then who knows? Completely different.
So what I did, I wrote 3 books right after that. I wrote one that had nothing to do with it because I wanted something new to write. And it was, I did some research on the East European arms trade, which is kind of a big problem over there because the East European arms trade is kind of one of the main suppliers of the warlords in Africa and also Southeast Asia, which is where some of the worst atrocities happen.
Right. Yeah, yeah.
So I came up with an idea. I was like, what I want to do though is I wanted to write a love story. I really wanted to write some kind of like a romance, but I also wanted my thriller element to it. So I wrote an action romance that takes place during black operations around the East European arms trade. So that
That's
was,
the
yeah,
combination.
yeah. And I love the way it came out. And I'm deciding if that's going to be the next one I publish or not. But, so I wrote that. And then a friend of mine a few friends actually asked me if I'd ever want to write horror, like something really scary. Right. I'm like, yeah, my favorite movie of all time was a horror movie. I'm like, I'm just not even sure I'd know how to write something that was actually scary because most things aren't that scary. Like like a grown adult, it's hard to scare them. So I took the challenge and tried it, and I wrote I think it came out good. I used my knowledge of psychology on things that I know the human mind naturally finds unsettling,
Yeah.
and certain things like a human face that is a little bit off, right? Maybe like you're looking at a human face, but it doesn't have teeth or doesn't have eyes.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
Um,
definitely.
a little bit misshapen, like things like that, right? Some of those images, I was like, I could use that for something. And then what I came up with was like, well, we have this whole explosion in AI these days. So I made that one as in the East European setting. I actually made it in the near future where a NATO specialist team is sent to investigate a facility where they believe it's housing some kind of weaponized AI. What they find inside is it's a sentient AI. It's able to think and feel on its own. And the facility is not a facility. The facility is the AI's brain. And they end up trapped inside the facility. And the AI now can use bio readouts on people. It can look at their face and say, this is who this person is. They have past trauma. This woman, her daughter killed herself 10 years ago. This man was in war and he has PTSD, like things like that, right? And it uses that to create hallucinations and imagery that basically messes with them to the point that it turns that person psychotic and then weaponizes that person against the others. So that's the idea of that one.
That's a great idea, and it's scarily is plausible.
I thought it was very believable. And
Yeah, I think so nowadays.
when I wrote it, I spent a lot of late nights writing it. So I'm sitting in a dark room alone writing. And I scared the shit out of myself. So
You see this candle burning away, typing away.
So then the third one I wrote, I just finished this one. And this one, I'm not done with it. I'm still finishing it. But this one actually goes back this is a loose follow-up to The Last Gunfighter.
Yeah.
That something that I didn't really do too much of on The Last Gunfighter because I wanted the theme to be Nick Rogers. It was more about him and what he goes through. I wanted to actually write a story that really exposes some of the corruption in modern law enforcement because I saw it firsthand and I can tell you it's true. It really is there. And, I was a cop. I should be, you would think that I would defend other cops, but no, there was definitely corruption. I definitely saw it. And that's something that I like the idea of bringing the light to, but I also, now me personally, I never conform to one genre, right? So crime theme or crime drama, crime fiction sounds fun, but I'm not just going to write that. I want some kind of thriller aspect to it. And I wanted to add in some paranoia. So I wrote it about a little bit based on the Count of Monte Cristo, also with a little bit of Hamlet in there. So the idea is revenge, right? Some of the corruption that I saw firsthand is basically the protagonist he decides he's going to wage war and he starts systematically targeting and killing law enforcement administrators, law enforcement, the cops that basically went against him sort of thing. He basically becomes a terrorist and he's the bad guy, So, and then it goes a lot into the crime drama, a lot of the procedural stuff where the cops are trying to locate him and how like the law would work when they have to first call. Now they're calling in the feds and the National Guard to try and contain the situation. So a lot of it is very procedural, but it's also very chilling. Like a lot of it's like I put some stuff in there with like IEDs and, like paranoia, like to the point where you have some guys that they're walking to their cruiser for the day, but then they get to the cruiser and like so many bombings have happened at this point. They're scared to even so much as touch their door handle, let alone
Yeah.
get inside that cruiser, and God knows what's going to happen, right? So it's things like that, like it's paranoia in the book that I create, very suspenseful.
It sounds like you just almost cruise through your writing.
Yeah,
You're not
once
there
I have
like,
an idea.
yeah, oh, yeah. You can just tell. You can just tell. There's no chance of writer's block or anything. It's just like
No,
I know where I'm going.
the writer's block, I think, was an issue I had as a cop because of the amount of writing I had to do with police
Yeah.
reports and stuff. I don't have writer's block anymore. I have my own,
Yeah.
and I can dedicate as much time as I want to it. So when I decide I want to sit down and write something, it'll be written pretty fast.
Yeah. It
And
sounds like
as
it.
long once I have the idea, I'll write the outline. I'll write the character and the ending, and then I'll come up. So it doesn't. The process. I can write a book, pretty much one book a month if I want to.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's I think the last thing was it Tarantino, his scripts, he did it in a short
yeah,
space of time,
yeah. Once if you really like writing, then
Yeah.
yeah.
It's
So yeah,
brilliant.
and I really do. So, but yeah. So but obviously the one we're talking about though is the Last Gunfighter. So
Yeah.
that is this here. It's available on all forms. You can just Google it. It's everywhere.
Yeah,
Amazon's
that
the easiest one, I think. But
it will be the link for the Last Gunfighter will be in the description as well, there as
yeah,
well. And all the links for your social media as well, and
yeah.
whatever there as well. And just finally, what's the future for yourself? Is it just going to be writing books, which sounds pretty fun?
I think so. I like what I do also with the independent contractor thing.
Yeah.
So that's pretty good money. So I think I'm gonna keep up with doing both for a while. But ultimately, yes, I would like to just do writing full time because once I have a few books out there and they start selling well, that is enough that it'll make you enough money that you can definitely sustain and live on. So
Yeah.
and once I get to that point, then I'll be perfectly happy because yeah, I would love to just sit down and write for a living.
Yeah, I
So
don't think that's going to be too far away.
yeah, I mean, if I keep producing books, yeah. And my first, I'll see what the sales look like. I think October is the first statement I get. But I did a little bit of marketing on my own, and then it's only been out for a month, and I've already seen the amount of link clicks that have gone onto that. Just the Amazon page alone is like 3,000.
Most books. I had a conversation with a PR lady that's helping me with the podcast and the
Mhm.
things that I want to do, and she's telling me to write a book. And I was like, yeah, but I've researched it, and most people don't even sell 250 books. And she went, yeah, well, that's actually true. You need to do this, you need to do that, and you're,
You have to market on your own.
yeah, definitely. And
You
so,
cannot rely on someone else to market if you're an author.
yeah, exactly.
So I'm learning how to do that basically, but my publisher, they told me that if I want, I can pay a consultant to do the marketing for me. That just costs a lot of money. So I'm not sure if I want to do that just yet.
Yeah, that's the thing because the whole getting the publishing is totally changed now, and I had that explained to me. I was like, "Oh, can I go?" And then the lady was laughing. She's like, "Yeah, if you're sort of Stephen King or John Grisham, you do it that way, but the reality is you don't do it that way. You do it this way." I was like, "Oh, okay, thanks for telling me."
Yeah. It's when you're relatively new to it, you really have to do your own marketing.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Social media and then podcasts. And then I have some promotions coming up. I had someone reach out to me for a training program he runs. He read the book. It's a guy I knew from a long time ago. He read the book and he just told me that it's basically this training program they do in Central Florida where it's tactical training for civilians. It's like kind of like, protection, like you're learning how to protect yourself.
Yeah, that's
Self-defense. And they have, I'm not sure if they have shooting in there, but I know they have like tactics where you like home defense type things where you're clearing your house. He said, come on out for a free demo, lunch, and a book signing. So I have that. So I have a couple more things that are kind of like that that we're
brilliant.
doing. So yeah.
It's great. I think. I mean, it's been amazing talking to you.
Yeah, definitely. You too.
Yeah, I could literally listen to you just talking, whether it's about writing books or the things that you've been through. And it's just so interesting, genuinely so interesting. I've loved every second of it. The time's absolutely flown by. You wouldn't think it's an hour and a half that's
Yeah, I
gone by.
see it's been an hour and a half now.
Yeah, but I could probably carry on for hours. And yeah, I've enjoyed every second of it. And
Likewise.
so much for coming on there, Jared. Appreciate your
Yeah, of
time.
course.
Thank you so much.
So, all right. Well, it was great meeting you. And definitely thank you for having me on. I had a really good time talking to you as well.
Thank you so much.